The living room light was still casting on the wall when Lucas Medina disappeared from the South Valley neighborhood in Albuquerque, New Mexico, population 12,348. The early June evening draped the city in the characteristic dry desert heat, the kind of warmth that lingered on the pavement long after the sun had set. At 9:42 p.m., Lucas's neighbor, Mrs. Sofia Ramirez, had waved goodbye through her kitchen window as the 18-year-old held a cold bottle of water while walking through the narrow path separating their two modest homes. Lucas was returning the clear glass bottle that Mrs. Ramirez had given him earlier, the bottle with old scratches that she had kept for over 15 years. The elderly woman watched Lucas's figure gradually fade into the darkness at the end of the dirt road where the pale yellow streetlight didn't reach. What happened in the next 53 minutes would haunt Albuquerque for more than a decade afterward. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Albuquerque in the summer of 2009 was enveloped in the arid desert heat, with the evening atmosphere thickened by the familiar quiet of a city that still maintained a slow pace of life in the southeast residential area. The asphalt roads were lightly cracked from the daytime heat. The pale yellow streetlights shone down on the fine dust that hadn't yet settled, and the quiet front yards were filled only with the steady hum of air conditioners from the households. In that setting, Lucas Medina, 18 years old, stepped out of his house on what seemed like an ordinary evening for his family. Carrying little with him and without announcing any clear plans, Lucas only told his mother that he would go meet a friend for a bit and then come back. The door closed behind him, and the sound of his footsteps fading on the stone-paved path in front of the yard were the last sounds the family heard from him that night. Time passed far longer than Lucas's usual daily routine, causing the family to feel increasingly uneasy. Unanswered calls, messages with no reply, and initial guesses that he might have stopped by a friend's house or somewhere else quickly became meaningless as the atmosphere in the house grew heavy with unusual silence. The family tried walking around the neighborhood to look for signs of him, checking the familiar turns that Lucas often took, but they didn't see his car, and no one remembered encountering him that evening. Anxiety turned to fear as time continued to drag on without any information. No longer able to search on their own in the night, the family made the final decision they always hoped they would never have to make: contact the police and report Lucas Medina missing, starting a case file that at that time, no one in the family could imagine would drag on for many years afterward. When the Medina family contacted the police, the call was immediately transferred to the Missing Persons Report Intake Unit of the Albuquerque Police Department. A duty team was dispatched to the house to record initial information. Opening a case file always begins with clearly identifying the identity, age, and factors that could affect the urgency level of the incident. In Lucas's case, the fact that he was only 18, left home without specific notice, and had no contact after many hours led the duty team to view this as not a situation that could be ignored. Information collection was conducted according to procedure. The police requested the most recent photo of Lucas, descriptions of his height, weight, hairstyle, the clothes he was wearing when he left home, along with identifying features like the scar on his left shoulder and the leather bracelet he always wore. The family provided all the information they could, trying to recall every small detail, because everything could become an important factor. After the identification part, the police moved on to learning about Lucas's daily habits, where he usually went, whether he drove, which areas in the city he liked to hang out in, or whether he had a habit of walking in the evening. They asked about Lucas's recent mental state, his level of stability, any unusual changes in the past few weeks, if any. The family said that Lucas showed no clear signs of instability, didn't mention any bad things or major problems. However, the current silence and lack of traces made every answer uncertain. The police also requested information about Lucas's social relationships, close friends, classmates, former coworkers, and people the family knew had regular contact with him. A list of names was compiled, from friends Lucas often met to those the family only vaguely knew through his stories. In that list was Emery Calderon, a name mentioned multiple times when talking about people Lucas often talked to on the phone. With each piece of information collected, the police proceeded to re-establish the last time the family saw Lucas. They asked for details about the time he stepped out the door, the time the family started to worry, and the time they first tried to contact him unsuccessfully. All of it was recorded into an initial timeline, though there were no external factors to cross-reference yet, but this is always the foundation for deploying the next steps in the investigation. After completing the initial recording, Lucas Medina's file was officially opened in the system with the classification of missing persons for a young adult. In the internal classification, the police assessed the urgency level as medium-high due to the sudden disappearance, the unusual non-contact time, and the fact that Lucas had no similar behavior before. An official description was entered into the system so that patrol units the following night and day could identify him. The duty team also immediately notified the Missing Persons Investigation Unit to transfer the file to the field screening phase in the nearby area. At this point, there were no signs indicating that Lucas was in danger or affected by others. But the prolonged absence along with not finding any clues around the house meant the case was not assessed as a typical runaway. The family sat in the living room as the police completed the necessary forms, each person trying to provide additional details they thought might be useful. All the authorities had at this point was a verbal description of who Lucas was, the time he left home, and the unusual silence afterward. When the file was officially entered into the system, this was the first step in the investigation process, a process that no one in the family imagined would last longer than they thought. The morning after Lucas Medina's missing person file was opened, the Missing Persons Investigation Unit of the Albuquerque Police Department began deploying the first search step according to the procedure applied to the case of a young adult disappearing without a trace. The initial screening always focuses on the nearest locations because the probability of the victim still being around the usual living area is higher in the first few hours after disappearance, especially when there is no signal indicating he traveled far by personal vehicle. The search team divided the residential area around the house into small grids to check each part systematically. Officers walked along the curbs, observing each yard and wooded area that could obstruct the view, paying attention to any strange objects or signs indicating someone stopped or moved unusually at night. They also knocked on doors within a close radius, asking residents if anyone saw Lucas leave the house or saw him standing talking to someone else, or noticed any noteworthy vehicle stopping in the area the previous evening. Most residents said they didn't hear strange noises or see any unusual activity, and most were already asleep during the time he disappeared. With this information, the police concluded there were no direct witnesses who saw Lucas's initial direction of movement after he left home. After completing the check in the neighborhood, the police moved on to screening the routes that, according to the family's description, Lucas might have taken if he wanted to leave the residential area. The family provided a list of familiar routes based on Lucas's habits: the road leading to the small commercial area near the house, the turn to the larger road where there were souvenir shops and coffee shops, and a shortcut that he occasionally used to quickly reach the nearby gas station. Each route was checked by driving slowly, observing the road surface, curbs, and empty areas behind shops or homes. The officers looked for fresh tire tracks, dropped items, or any signs indicating a young person was present or encountered an unusual situation. However, all three main routes showed completely normal road surfaces, no signs of collision, no skid marks or brake marks, and no items that could be related to Lucas. This reduced the possibility of an accident right near the residential area, while raising the question of whether Lucas might have turned in a less noticeable direction. The search team continued to expand the scope to gathering spots that teenagers in the area sometimes visited in the evening. These locations included a public basketball court, a parking lot behind a row of small shops, and an empty lot a few blocks from Lucas's house. These were places that might have traces of activity or personal items left behind, but when the police checked, every area was deserted and had no noteworthy objects. The empty lot had a few tire tracks, but they were faint enough to indicate they weren't from the previous night. In the basketball court, there were only scattered shoe prints from recent players, but nothing related to the description the family provided about Lucas. When the public points were checked, the police returned to ask the family again to identify less common roads, but that Lucas might use as a shortcut. The family mentioned a small path connecting two housing areas, which wasn't an official route but wide enough for pedestrians or bicycles to pass. This area was carefully checked, the ground was lightly covered in dust, no new footprints clear enough to determine the time, and no items or signs indicating Lucas had passed here at the time in question. Though it yielded no results, this information helped the police eliminate one more possibility. Searching in the nearby range also included checking locations where minor accidents could occur that people often overlook, such as narrow alleys, downhill sections next to fences, or spots hidden from the main road view. These areas were thoroughly checked with flashlights and supporting lighting equipment, but the search team found no signs of a vehicle leaving the road, no paint chips or scratches on fences, and no materials like broken glass or car plastic. This reduced the possibility that Lucas had an accident near home without anyone knowing. When the first search wave ended, the officers gathered to evaluate the overview. The entire area around Lucas's house had been thoroughly screened. His familiar routes had been checked, public points had been examined, and little-known shortcuts had also been eliminated. But there were no traces leading to where Lucas might have gone. The only information the police obtained was the complete absence of any useful indications. This is not uncommon in newly reported missing persons cases, but with Lucas's case, it created an almost absolute void that made determining the next step more difficult than anticipated. This was the entire result of the initial search effort, and none of the results were sufficient to provide clearer direction for the case at this time. After completing the initial search wave, but obtaining no noteworthy traces, the next step in the Albuquerque Police Department's investigation procedure was to focus on people directly acquainted with Lucas Medina to determine who might have met or contacted him during the time he went missing. The goal of this phase was to build a map of Lucas's social relationships, thereby finding intersections between behavior, habits, and interactions that occurred on the last day he appeared. A list of acquaintances was compiled based on information provided by the family, including classmates, former co-workers at the store where Lucas had a part-time job, a few friends known in the surrounding area, and people who had contacted via phone recently. Each person was invited to provide information about activities, conversations, or the most recent appointments they had with Lucas. During the interviews, most friends said that Lucas's life in recent days had no clear changes. One classmate said the last time he met him was the previous weekend, when Lucas borrowed a book but there was no special conversation. Another said he saw Lucas at a convenience store a few days before the disappearance, but it was just a casual nod. These statements all had in common: no one saw Lucas showing unusual signs, no one heard him mention meeting someone special, and no one had information about a specific plan for the evening he left home. Though many statements were repetitive and didn't open new investigative directions, the police still recorded details about people Lucas often contacted via messages. This list helped identify some names that stood out more due to higher than average contact frequency. Among them, the most prominent name was Emery Calderon, whom, according to Lucas's family, he frequently texted and called in the past few months. The relationship between Lucas and Emery was not something the family fully understood, but they knew the two had regular contact, sometimes lasting many hours in the evening. Therefore, Emery was viewed as someone needing more thorough interviewing than other friends. When invited to talk, Emery stated that the last time she spoke with Lucas was a few days before he went missing, and that their relationship was simply friends keeping in touch via phone. She affirmed she didn't meet Lucas on the night he went missing and didn't know where he planned to go. This statement was carefully recorded, and the police cross-referenced it with family information, but found no contradictions at that time. Emery stated clearly, without hesitation or avoidance, and the content matched what some acquaintances on the interview list described about the relationship between the two. This led the police to temporarily not view her as directly related to the time Lucas disappeared. To ensure no information was missed, the investigator continued asking Emery about the most recent conversations with Lucas, whether he mentioned meeting anyone that evening or not. Emery replied that she didn't hear Lucas say anything about specific plans, and to her knowledge, he had no intention of meeting any acquaintances or other friends. Some supplementary questions were asked to more firmly determine the time gap between their last contact and the time he left home, but there were still no unusual signs in the answers, no hesitation, no change in tone when talking about the evening of the incident, no reaction that made the police suspect she was hiding something. During the process, the police also tried to screen people Lucas had less close relationships with but had contacted in the past few weeks. Some said they only exchanged briefly with Lucas via social media or messaging about general topics. None of them had information about any appointments on the evening Lucas disappeared. These statements largely served to confirm that Lucas had no standout social activities or unusual changes right before the disappearance. When the investigation team compiled the information obtained in the acquaintance interview phase, a temporary conclusion was drawn that no statements provided evidence of a meeting or special event occurring on the night Lucas left home. Information about his social relationships remained within normal bounds, and no one had significant conflicts or disputes with him according to those asked. Emery Calderon, despite being the person who contacted Lucas most frequently, also didn't provide any details that made the police suspicious at this time. The acquaintance interview phase concluded with all statements fully recorded, screened by relevance level, and stored in the file for subsequent screening steps. For the police, this was a necessary step to eliminate the simplest hypotheses and confirm that Lucas's disappearance could not be explained immediately by close relationships or his usual daily social activities. From this point, the investigative direction had to shift to broader possibilities because no witnesses or friends provided useful clues about Lucas's movement on the evening he disappeared. After completing the recording of statements from acquaintances and finding no signs that anyone had met Lucas Medina on the evening he went missing, the investigation team moved on to screening locations that Lucas frequently visited. The goal of this step was to search for the possibility that Lucas was present at one of the places more familiar to him than ordinary public points. Based on the family's description and confirmation from friends, there were a few places considered positions Lucas often stopped by in the evening or when needing private space to think. The first location was an abandoned house not far from the Medina family's residential area. This was one of the places Lucas and some friends had visited a few times in the past, not to gather but just a quiet destination when they needed to leave crowded environments. This abandoned house had been dilapidated for many years, but still retained its structure, with access through a rusty gate and broken windows on the ground floor. When the police arrived to check, they observed the surrounding yard, the front porch, and the empty land on the side of the house for any traces, such as fresh footprints, bottle caps, pieces of clothing, or signs of recent entry. However, the ground was covered in a thick layer of dust and had no clear footprints. Inside the house, the rooms were full of dust, cobwebs, and long accumulated debris, with no traces indicating anyone had entered in the recent period. Everything remained as it was when abandoned, with no newly dropped objects or signs that Lucas had appeared here after leaving home. The second point was a few hundred meters west of the residential area, a wide empty lot, where groups of teenagers in the area occasionally gathered to chat or play spontaneous sports. This was an area with strong winds frequently blowing through, keeping the ground dry and easily erasing traces. When the police arrived to screen, they observed dirt pits, old tire tracks, and any remaining trampling marks. However, the empty lot showed no signs of recent activity. The appearing tire tracks were faint and belonged to many days prior. There were no personal items like water bottles, paper bags, or objects easily dropped from pockets or backpacks. Besides a few branches broken by strong winds, the police couldn't identify any details that could relate to Lucas's disappearance. The third location was a familiar hangout spot for him, a public basketball court situated between two rows of houses. Lucas sometimes came here in the evenings to shoot a few hoops or sit on the bench, watching others play. When the search team arrived, they found the court empty, with only a few mixed shoe prints belonging to the groups of teenagers who frequently played there. These shoe prints were nothing special, and their positions indicated they could have appeared on any day of the week. The benches had no forgotten items, and the nearby trash area contained only ordinary garbage, nothing that could be linked to Lucas. The absence of personal belongings or unusual signs led the police to conclude that the basketball court provided no additional useful information. Beyond these three main points, the police also visited several other locations that Lucas had frequented in the weeks or months prior. A small coffee shop where he often bought takeout drinks at the end of the day, a convenience store on the main road near his home, and a densely wooded area near a small park were all checked. At the coffee shop, staff reported not seeing Lucas the previous evening. The shop's security camera had not been reviewed at this stage, but the statement alone was sufficient to confirm the shop was not his destination that night. At the convenience store, the night shift employee said they did not notice Lucas, but since they could not remember every customer, this information was not highly conclusive. The park area also showed no signs of gatherings from the previous evening, with the dry ground lacking any skid marks or abandoned items. Another point mentioned by friends was a small trail next to an area with low bushes where Lucas sometimes walked to avoid busy roads. When the police checked this area, they only noted a few old footprints and broken dry branches with no determinable timing. Since this area was frequently used by people, these traces had no evidentiary value, proving Lucas had been there on the night of his disappearance. After completing the sweep of all locations related to his daily habits, or where Lucas might have stopped, the police compiled the results and concluded that there was no information or trace at any of the places he used to visit. Each location yielded the same outcome: no one saw Lucas, no items belonging to him, no signs of unusual activity, and no clear indications of his direction after leaving home. This phase, though it did not advance the investigation, was valuable in ruling out the most accessible possibilities. It confirmed that Lucas did not appear at any familiar spots after leaving home and left no traces in the areas he habitually visited. The complete absence of information from these locations kept the case in a state of unclear direction, and the investigative team had to consider broader scopes in the subsequent sweeps. Checking the locations Lucas Medina frequented yielded no traces or useful information, forcing the investigative team to shift to a broader search phase, focusing on the large and complex terrain areas characteristic of Albuquerque. The map was expanded to three main areas: the Rio Grande, West Mesa, and the Eastern Foothills ranges. These were diverse, expansive, and sparsely populated areas where a person could pass through or stop without easily leaving recognizable signs. The Rio Grande with its riverside paths and damp banks, West Mesa with its dry, elevated plateaus, and the foothills with winding trails at the base of the Sandia Mountains, all were areas the search team had to consider due to their openness and the possibility that a vehicle like Lucas's pickup truck could have entered them. The investigative team contacted support units to mobilize sufficient forces for the wide scope. The Albuquerque Police Department's Air Support Unit deployed helicopters for overhead observation, aiding in scanning areas difficult for ground forces to access quickly. K-9 teams were brought in to track scents, though the time elapsed since Lucas's disappearance made detection less likely. Additionally, volunteer search teams from the local community were mobilized to assist in checking vast land areas or those without vehicle access. The first area examined was the strip of land along the Rio Grande. This was a place with paths along the riverbank where locals often walked or jogged in the mornings and afternoons, but it tended to be quieter in the evenings. The search team spread out in small groups, walking along the trails and checking clearings among dense bushes. The river water was low at this time, exposing mud and sandbanks, but there were no unusual depressions or fresh tire tracks. Flat ground areas were thoroughly scanned for any debris or foreign objects that might have fallen from a vehicle or bag. However, the entire riverside check revealed no signs that Lucas or his truck had been there. West Mesa was selected next due to its vast, dry, and vehicle-accessible land. This was a sparsely populated area, often seen as a pass-through spot with little attention. The flat terrain and strong winds made traces easy to erase within hours, especially in dry, hot conditions. When the search teams arrived to sweep, they divided the area into wide segments and used off-road vehicles to move in parallel lines observing the surface. Any fresh tire tracks would be noted, but most were old and mixed from locals using the trails in previous days. K-9 groups were sequentially brought in, but due to the time passed since Lucas's disappearance, scent tracking yielded no notable results. West Mesa, despite its size and theoretical possibilities, provided no traces related to Lucas's truck or his presence on the night he left home. The eastern foothills of Albuquerque were a more complex terrain, with many winding trails around the base of the Sandia Mountains, interspersed with rocky areas and tall bushes. This was a place locals hiked or exercised, but rarely crowded in the evenings. The search teams faced more difficulties here due to slopes, narrow paths, and bushes obstructing views. They had to walk in groups, carrying lighting equipment to closely examine small paths and narrow spaces between rocks. Despite efforts to cover the widest possible range, there were no forgotten items, no signs of vehicles entering the area, and no fresh footprints on the dirt paths. Given the terrain and low evening usage, the foothills provided no signs to clarify Lucas's journey. During the expanded sweep, the search teams also considered the possibility that Lucas went farther outside the city, but all information from the family indicated he had no habit of leaving Albuquerque in the evenings, especially alone. This led police to prioritize city limits before considering farther areas. However, key city points Lucas might have visited had already been swept, and even the most open or least frequented land areas yielded no related traces. Another important part of the expanded search was aerial observation. APD helicopters flew over wide areas like West Mesa and southern parts of the city to look for anomalies, vehicles parked off-road, disturbed ground surfaces, or metal objects reflecting sunlight. However, the observation flights recorded no suspicious points. Albuquerque's terrain is vast with many open areas, but that very fact made searching difficult. Lack of obstacles meant traces could be blown away by wind or covered by dust over time. After many hours of searching across key areas, the investigative team compiled the information and confirmed no physical discoveries suggesting Lucas's direction or destination. No pickup truck matching his description, no debris, no personal items, and no witnesses claiming to have seen him in the swept areas. The expanded search efforts, though properly executed and covering the highest probability areas, yielded results similar to previous steps, no traces leading to where Lucas went after leaving home. This phase ended with confirmation that if Lucas had passed through any of these areas, he left no signs clear enough to identify during the search time frame. The complete lack of physical clues in the expanded terrain left the investigative team unable to determine the case's next direction. After completing the expanded search over vast terrain without any physical traces, the investigative team shifted to another critical sweep direction, checking security cameras in areas Lucas Medina might have passed through on the night he left home. Although public surveillance systems in 2009 were not as dense as in later decades, collecting footage from private points like ATMs, convenience stores, and gas stations could still provide key information. The investigative team divided the list of locations based on Lucas's movement habits, possible routes, and the few lit points operating at night in the quiet residential area. The first point checked was an ATM at the intersection near the Medina family residence. ATM cameras typically recorded continuously for transactions, but often captured images of passers-by or those in view. However, the camera data here showed no sign of Lucas in the relevant time frame. A few customers withdrawing money in the evening were recorded, but none related to him. The team noted empty time gaps between activities, all consistent with low nighttime traffic in the area. The investigative team proceeded to a convenience store a few blocks from Lucas's home. This was the next point because Lucas had appeared there on some previous evenings, according to friends. The store's camera data, though not high quality, was sufficient to identify people entering and exiting from opening to closing. Reviewing the footage, the team confirmed images of Lucas entering the store alone on the night he disappeared. The footage showed him walking in by himself, going to the counter to buy a bottle of water, then leaving shortly after paying. There were no unusual signs in his behavior, no one accompanying him or waiting outside within the camera's view. Based on the timestamp in the video, this was the last time Lucas was clearly seen on any camera that night. Immediately after confirming this footage, police expanded the camera sweep radius around the store. The goal was to find which direction Lucas went after exiting. Cameras examined included one at a gas station, a few hundred meters from the convenience store, one in front of a small diner, and an old system at an auto repair shop. However, most cameras from that era had limited quality, low resolution, narrow views, and often activated only by direct motion in front. The gas station had a camera facing the parking lot, but in the relevant time, it recorded no vehicles or people, matching Lucas's description. The diner camera was not operational all night, as the old equipment only recorded during business hours. The auto repair shop camera was misaligned from before, capturing only part of the sidewalk, insufficient to determine anyone's direction. Subsequent notable positions were on main roads Lucas might have used to leave the convenience store area. However, most lacked cameras, as these were residential streets or small-scale commercial zones where surveillance was not common in 2009. Some other stores in the area had cameras but were either turned off early or no longer retained data due to automatic tape erasure. After checking all accessible camera sources, the investigative team compiled a list of times, locations, and possible paths based solely on Lucas leaving the convenience store alone, appearing completely normal, with no further images recording him. From all collected data, the police's interim conclusion was that his appearance on the convenience store camera was the last time Lucas was clearly seen via surveillance on the night of his disappearance. No nearby cameras captured his direction afterward. This could be due to 2009 surveillance limitations, camera placement lacking broad views, or Lucas turning onto a side road outside any device's range. This information gap made tracing Lucas's path difficult, as while confirming his last camera appearance, there were no indications of his immediate next direction. Ending the camera sweep phase, the investigative team had a critical timestamp but could not expand from it. The footage affirmed Lucas appeared normal at the convenience store, not anxious, not followed, and with no signs of contact with any strangers. However, the entire camera search process stopped there, leaving unresolved questions of which way Lucas left the area and what happened right after he exited the final camera's view. After reviewing all accessible cameras but obtaining only a single video segment of Lucas appearing at the convenience store, the investigation team shifted to another data source capable of assisting in tracing the boy's journey: mobile phone data. In many missing persons cases, analyzing phone activity, calls, messages, and location information often plays a crucial role in determining the victim's last known position. However, in 2009, this technology still had many limitations, particularly in reconstructing detailed travel paths or pinpointing the exact location of the device. The first step in the analysis process was to collect usage records from the carrier. Investigators sent an official request to obtain call logs, messages, and connection data for Lucas's phone number in the period before and after he left home. The records received showed that Lucas's phone made no calls after the time the family recalled him leaving the house, and no incoming calls were answered during the period he was considered missing. A few messages were sent to Lucas's number that night, but all went unopened or unanswered. This information aligned with what the family reported, that calls and messages from them received no response after he left home. The next part involved data on connections to cell towers. Every mobile phone, when powered on, periodically connects to the nearest or most suitable cell tower, generating data that can help identify the area where the device was active. However, 2009 technology only allowed location determination within a very wide radius, depending on the tower's coverage area, and could not provide specific coordinates like later positioning systems. When Lucas's cell tower records were returned, police determined that his device had connected to a tower located in the southern area where the family lived. However, this tower's coverage encompassed a vast range of many square miles, including the residential area, main roads, and parts of open land leading out of the city. This made the cell tower data only valuable in confirming that Lucas's phone remained active for a period after he left home, but it could not indicate which direction he had traveled. Another issue was that the exact time Lucas's phone stopped operating could not be determined solely from the cell tower logs, as the device could lose signal for various reasons, being powered off, battery depletion, or moving to an area without coverage. The logs only indicated the last time the phone connected to the tower, with no further activity thereafter. Police could not distinguish whether Lucas turned off the phone himself. The device was no longer in a coverage area, or some other situation occurred that prevented continued connection. In addition to connection data, investigators also attempted to recover deleted messages from Lucas's phone, as these messages sometimes contain information revealing plans, meeting points, or the victim's mental state before disappearance. However, 2009 data recovery technology was insufficient to retrieve message content deleted from the device's memory or the carrier's system. Retrieving deleted message data was nearly impossible within the scope of consumer mobile devices at that time. Carriers only retained minimal metadata such as send times, but not message content. Therefore, even if messages had been deleted, there was no way to recover them to know what he had written or received. The next limitation lay in device positioning capability. In 2009, most phones did not have continuously active GPS systems. Some models were equipped with GPS, but only activated it when the user opened applications requiring location, which Lucas rarely used. Phones did not automatically send location signals to the carrier or any agency, preventing police from tracking his path based on GPS data. This eliminated the possibility of retroactively tracing his route using methods that many later cases could apply, thanks to more advanced technology. After cross-referencing all phone data, the investigation team compiled a concise summary. Lucas's phone was active for a short time after he left home, connecting to a large cell tower, but providing no clear direction of travel. There were no calls or messages after that point. Deleted messages could not be recovered, and there was no GPS data. Thus, although Lucas's phone was on for a certain period, the information obtained from the device provided no clues that could help determine his path or location on the night of his disappearance. Some missing persons cases are resolved when phone data bridges information gaps, but in this case, every analysis effort yielded the same conclusion: the device left no valuable trace for tracking. This forced police back to the initial difficulty, not knowing which direction Lucas left the convenience store, not knowing whom he contacted, and having no indicators to narrow the search area. The phone data, instead of opening new investigative leads, only further confirmed the technological limitations of 2009 and kept the case in a state of unclear direction. The lack of new leads from phone data analysis prompted the investigation team to revisit factors related to Lucas Medina's personal interactions, particularly those who had disagreements or conflicts with him. This step aimed to rule out the possibility that the disappearance was linked to personal arguments, conflicts, or social disputes, even though initial information from family and friends indicated Lucas was not someone with many relationship clashes. The team compiled a list of names mentioned in family accounts or by friends as individuals Lucas may have been at odds with in the past. Among those identified, a former classmate who had a heated argument with Lucas during the previous school year was considered the first name to check. The two had clashed during a group activity at school, leading to a minor scuffle, but according to friends, the matter had been resolved long ago. When police approached and questioned this individual about the night Lucas went missing, he stated he had not seen Lucas recently and had not contacted him in many months. He also provided an alibi from family members that he was home all evening. There were no signs that the old strained relationship was connected to Lucas's disappearance. Another name was a former coworker from a part-time job who had a minor dispute with Lucas while both worked at a store a few months earlier. This employee was brought in for questioning. He admitted to a small conflict over shift scheduling, but insisted it was just a minor workplace incident. When asked about the time of Lucas's disappearance, he provided his work schedule, confirmed by the manager that he was present throughout the evening shift. Internal store cameras also recorded him working during the relevant time, ruling out any involvement. Another individual mentioned by the family was a neighbor who had a conflict with Lucas over a minor issue involving noisy pets. The incident occurred a few months prior and had quickly died down, but police still considered the possibility of lingering resentment. When questioned, the resident cooperated and stated that on the night Lucas went missing, he was not home, attending a friend gathering on the other side of the city. Attendees confirmed his presence, and restaurant payment records showed he left the area in the late afternoon and returned late at night. There was no information linking him to Lucas's disappearance. Beyond these cases, police also screened several less close friends who had minor disagreements with Lucas in school activities or on social media. Although these conflicts were mostly verbal arguments or temporary misunderstandings, the team still interviewed each person to confirm that none had direct contact with Lucas in the days near his disappearance. All provided statements consistent with not meeting Lucas and being unaware of any plans he had to meet someone that evening. None were noted for suspicious behavior or connection to any unusual events at the time. To ensure no possibilities were overlooked, the team also sought information on broader social relationships, such as people Lucas knew through extracurricular activities, online communities, or friend gatherings unknown to the family. Several were contacted via phone lists and social media, and all stated they had no contact with Lucas on the day he went missing. None reported having an appointment or plans to meet Lucas during the relevant period. When all statements were recorded, the police's initial summary showed no individuals from the list of those who had disagreements with Lucas had direct connection to the time of his disappearance. All had alibis or no clear motive. Moreover, the scope of the conflicts was minor, long past or resolved. Therefore, there was no basis to consider any of them suspects or notable persons of interest. Investigating relationships, though not yielding specific leads, was still seen as an important part to eliminate hypotheses related to personal conflicts, ensuring Lucas's disappearance did not stem from social disputes or unexpected events in daily interactions. This helped the team confirm that approaching through personal relationships did not open any clues. Ultimately, the conclusion of this phase was that there were no clear suspects, and no one from the group who had disagreed with Lucas played a role in his disappearance based on the information collected at that time. After ruling out the possibility that Lucas Medina disappeared due to personal conflicts and confirming no one in his social circle was directly linked to the time of disappearance, the investigation team moved to a more technical analysis step, constructing a map of possible travel directions for Lucas based on timing, travel habits, and the personal vehicle he typically used. This approach aimed to simulate reasonable choices Lucas might have made after leaving the convenience store, thereby forming areas for subsequent expanded searches. Investigators began by listing the main routes Lucas might have taken if continuing in his pickup truck. Based on the convenience store location where Lucas was last seen on camera, the surrounding area was divided into three primary directions: the direction back to his residential neighborhood, the direction toward the southern commercial area, and the direction out to roads leading to suburban areas or sparsely populated open lands. Each direction had unique characteristics that could influence the likelihood of Lucas choosing it. The first direction, back to his residential neighborhood, was considered because it was the natural route if Lucas had just stopped at the convenience store for items and was heading home. However, this direction had been searched in initial efforts near the home, with no signs of Lucas's vehicle along the route or in nearby parking lots. The roadway was clean, with no skid marks, debris, or physical evidence. The absence of any cameras recording Lucas on the way back also reduced the likelihood of this direction, though it could not be entirely ruled out. The second direction was toward the southern commercial area, where many stores stayed open later than other areas. This was a place a young person might go to buy more items, find a quiet spot, or simply drive out of the residential area to think. The team analyzed maps of this area and identified several parking locations and observable points from main roads. However, during on-site surveys, they found no traces or signs that Lucas's vehicle had been there. Parking lots were operating normally, with no abandoned vehicles or anything out of context. The third direction opened to routes leading to less trafficked areas, including small roads on the outskirts, segments connecting to West Mesa, or paths to wide-open lots that police had previously searched. Although searches in these terrain areas had been conducted in the expansion phase, the team still needed to cross-reference with route diagrams to check for any overlooked intersections that could lead a vehicle off the search zones. Through this cross-referencing, no intersections were deemed suitable for Lucas to turn into without leaving traces in the already surveyed areas. In addition to analyzing the three main directions, the police also considered the possibility that Lucas turned into narrow side roads, rarely used alleys, or routes known only to local residents. These routes were marked on the map and sequentially surveyed using appropriate vehicles. However, no alley or small road segment showed any signs that the pickup truck had passed through. Low-lying areas where the vehicle might have left tire tracks showed no clear traces. Thin sandy areas along the roads also recorded no recent tire marks. In an effort to ensure every possibility was checked, investigators conducted an analysis of travel times. Using the last timestamp when Lucas appeared at the convenience store, they estimated the time needed for him to reach areas within a radius of several miles. Each area was evaluated to determine whether Lucas could have arrived there within the time frame when the family began to worry and tried to contact him. The results indicated that he could have gone quite far if he had left immediately after the store. But this contradicted the expanded search areas that had recorded no signs of the vehicle. During the sweep, the investigation team also considered the possibility that the vehicle had entered an area with obscured terrain or difficult access, such as rarely used trails or land covered in dust, for long periods. Some such areas had been checked during the terrain search and also showed no signs. Although Albuquerque has many open lands, the pickup truck was fairly large in size, so if it entered a natural area, the likelihood of leaving traces was higher than for a smaller vehicle. However, they still found no such signs. Upon re-evaluating the entire survey process based on the map and search model, the police confirmed that all reasonable directions of travel had been checked, but yielded no clues. Lucas's vehicle did not appear on any route assessed as highly probable, nor was it seen on nearby cameras or in any parking lots within the survey scope. At the end of the phase analyzing travel directions and area-specific surveys, the investigation team had to admit that no point on the surveyed map showed signs that the vehicle had passed through or stopped. The disappearance of the vehicle, along with the absence of corresponding physical traces, left the reconstruction of Lucas's journey at a deadlock at this point, similar to previous investigation directions. After analyzing reasonable travel directions and surveying areas where Lucas Medina might have gone, but finding no traces of the vehicle or personal items, the investigation team returned to re-evaluating statements from individuals directly connected to Lucas, including Emery Calderon. Although her initial statement had no unusual points, the lack of progress in other investigation directions led the police to contact her again to clarify some details about the timing and extent of contact between her and Lucas near the time of his disappearance. When invited back for discussion, Emery was cooperative and willing to answer additional questions. Investigators focused on cross-referencing her initial statement with some newly established details after reviewing convenience store camera footage and surrounding routes. In the first interview, Emery stated she had no contact with Lucas on the evening he left home. However, when investigators probed further about the last time she remembered talking or texting with Lucas, Emery provided a slightly different timestamp than in her previous statement, leading to a minor inconsistency in the timeline. In the new statement, Emery said she might have texted with Lucas the day before he disappeared, though she was unsure if it was near evening or in the afternoon. This contradicted her previous statement, when she affirmed contact only a few days earlier. Although the difference was not significant, investigators noted this change and asked Emery to describe in more detail the circumstances of their last contact. Emery's response did not provide many clear details, and when pressed further, she explained that she didn't remember exactly because the conversation had no special content. Investigators also asked about Emery and Lucas's communication habits to see if the timeline change might simply result from Emery misremembering due to irregular contact frequency. Emery confirmed that sometimes they texted frequently, but there were also times when both interacted little for several days. She said that since there were no unusual signs in the days before Lucas disappeared, she didn't pay close attention to the last contact time. This partially explained the discrepancy in her statement, but also created a minor unresolved point compared to what she had said before. Additionally, investigators asked if Emery knew where Lucas planned to go or whom he planned to meet that evening. Emery repeated that she hadn't heard Lucas mention any plans, similar to her initial statement. However, her phrasing this time was more cautious, and when rephrased and asked again, she said Lucas sometimes didn't share everything fully, so she couldn't be certain about his plans that evening. This detail did not contradict her previous statement, but showed she was re-evaluating her description compared to the first time. The investigation team noted that there were no major changes or clear signs that Emery was deliberately withholding information at this point. The inconsistencies were all of the vague timeline type, common in witness statements when they don't remember events precisely, especially when unaware that the timing would become important. Investigators also found no details in the new statement that directly contradicted established evidence like camera footage or phone data. After the session, the investigators' internal report clearly stated that Emery's supplemental statement had a few points that did not match the initial one, but there was insufficient basis to consider this a material contradiction. These deviations could stem from inaccurate recall over time, rather than necessarily indicating concealment behavior. At this point, Emery's statement continued to be treated as reference material, but did not significantly alter the investigation direction, which still lacked clear progress due to missing information from other sources. At the end of the supplemental statement phase, the investigation team confirmed that although Emery remembered some details differently from the first time, no factor was strong enough to view this as a sign of significant contradiction. Her statement was filed with the case records, but not categorized as guiding information for the investigation at this time. When the supplemental questioning of Emery Calderon ended without opening a new investigation direction, the team handling Lucas Medina's disappearance case had to compile everything accomplished over consecutive days. At this point, they had completed nearly every procedural step applicable to a missing person case under 2009 technology conditions. Searches around the home, expanding the scope to large terrain areas, checking cameras, analyzing phone data, interviewing acquaintances, and screening relationships with potential conflict. However, each direction led to the same conclusion: no factor provided specific traces or next step guidance. The investigation team reevaluated all physical evidence, or more accurately, their absence. From the moment Lucas left home, no personal items were left behind on any route he might have taken. At the convenience store, his last camera appearance, no items were left, or any signs of a scuffle or abnormality. Notably, the failure to find the pickup truck, a large vehicle hard to completely vanish within city limits, became a noteworthy point, but insufficient to pinpoint any specific investigation direction. On the witness side, the situation was no better. No one in the neighborhood saw Lucas leave in any direction. No one reported encountering him on the road after the family last saw him. Those interviewed, friends, acquaintances, and even those with minor past conflicts, provided no information indicating contact with Lucas that evening. All statements revolved around normal activities, with no forewarning signs of a serious event. Police also swept area activities on the evening of Lucas's disappearance for any reported events or accidents nearby, but no matching data. From a technical perspective, procedural directions also reached their limits. Security cameras only showed Lucas leaving the convenience store, but not his subsequent direction. Phone data provided no specific coordinates, and 2009 technology offered no way to recover deleted message content. Reasonable routes were checked without detecting vehicle traces. Expanded areas from riverbanks to open lands in the foothills were swept but yielded no results. Compiling the factors, the investigation team realized this disappearance fell into a situation with almost no foothold. No physical evidence to follow, no witnesses to reconstruct events, and no signs Lucas entered any specific area after leaving the store. The only data in the file were Lucas leaving home, appearing on camera and vanishing without trace afterward, a chain too short to form any verifiable hypothesis. Per Albuquerque Police Department procedures at the time, when a missing person case lacked viable leads, despite checking all initial approaches, the file would be suspended and moved to the long-term monitoring list under the cold case unit. This did not mean the case was closed, but shifted to awaiting new information, with data fully stored and ready for reopening upon any new factor from witnesses, evidence, or supporting technology. In the final review of the initial investigation phase, the handling team agreed they could not advance further without new discoveries at that time. Field reports, technical data, and statements had all been checked to a detail level appropriate for available resources. No direction reached priority sufficient to maintain active investigation. Lucas's family was informed of this decision. Though police explained that moving the file to cold case was not an end, but a pause without new information, it remained hard news for the family, as the prolonged information void made every possibility frightening. The agency committed to continuing to record and review any subsequently reported information, but in 2009, no data existed to continue tracing. Ultimately, Lucas Medina's missing person file was officially marked as a cold case and transferred to storage per that year's standard procedures. All related documents were systematized, kept intact and ready if reason arose to reopen. The initial investigation phase closed in a state without answers, direction, or factors strong enough for active pursuit. When Lucas Medina's missing person file was moved to the cold case list at the end of 2009, the case officially entered a completely slowed phase. From that point, Lucas's file was no longer in active investigation, but handled under periodic mechanisms. The Albuquerque Police Department's cold case unit would reopen for review at set intervals or upon new information from any source. This reflected the unit's general operation for prolonged missing person cases, those without data for expansion but unclosable due to no evidence. The victim was alive or deceased. Per procedures then, each file was re-evaluated on a cycle of 6 months to a year, depending on the list's workload. In 2010, the first review was conducted on Lucas's file. A cold case unit team received the documents, reread all statements, analyzed steps from the active investigation phase, and checked for any new data in the system from related sources. But everything remained as before. No new witnesses, no new evidence, no reports of the pickup truck or Lucas appearing anywhere. Investigators confirmed the file completely lacked breakthrough factors. Other missing person cases in the area with higher priority took most resources, leaving Lucas's case noted but unable to deploy further that year. In 2011, the file was reopened again per cycle. This time, the cold case unit checked similar cases in the area for any patterns or common points related to Lucas's disappearance, but no files matched in method, timing, or circumstances. No reports suggested linkage. Additionally, the tip intake unit received no information about a young man matching Lucas's description appearing at hospitals, shelters, or other agencies. Identification data was not yet automated as in later years, so cross-referencing was manual, making new discoveries harder. In subsequent years, from 2012 to 2014, Lucas's file was reopened regularly, but all reviews ended identically. No technology existed to reconstruct paths from his phone signals, no central database for comparing vehicle signs, and no expanded city camera system for reviewing additional footage. Many new unit investigators viewed the file as a typical no-trace disappearance, but lacking tech support meant any re-evaluation repeated the conclusion: the case could not progress without external new factors. From 2015 to 2017, the cold case unit applied new procedures to integrate old data into digital storage systems. Lucas's file was nearly fully digitized, including search reports, route maps, statements, camera data, and phone data. The goal was to prevent loss or limitation in physical storage. However, digitization only eased file review, not created new information. No data activated upon system entry, and no search algorithms then were strong enough to cross-pattern from other cases or broader sources. In 2018, a review was conducted by a new investigator team in the cold case unit. They reread the entire file, focusing especially on the information gap from when Lucas left the convenience store until the vehicle vanished. However, no traffic monitoring devices from that time helped track personal vehicle movement. Most area gas stations and stores had changed storage systems and no longer held 2009 data. Contact efforts only confirmed old data was deleted, yielding nothing recoverable. The years 2019 and 2020 continued the old cycle. Numerous missing persons cases, missing minors, and other cases with higher priority levels consumed the resources of the cold case unit. Lucas's file remained in a state ready to be reopened upon new information. But since no one reported any new details, the file was simply reviewed, reassessed, and closed again without any changes to its contents. Some investigators noted that the failure to locate the pickup truck remained the strangest aspect of the case, but without a location, camera footage, or witnesses to gather more from, that observation could not be translated into any actual investigative steps. The year 2021 marked the 12th year the file had been on the cold case list. Technology had advanced compared to 2009, but most technologies for analyzing travel data, recovering deleted messages, or matching images required original data, which, in Lucas's case, either never existed or was no longer retained. Old cameras had been replaced, cell carriers no longer had detailed location data from that period, and the devices in the vehicle lacked automatic information storage systems. The investigator in charge of the end of 2021 review noted in the report, "No progress, no leads to pursue. File continues to be maintained on the waiting list." Over 13 years, the Lucas Medina file repeatedly went through similar cycles: reviewed, scanned, confirmed, no new information, then closed. The family occasionally sent additional information or asked police to consider certain situations they suspected might be related, but none matched the file's data. The family's periodic inquiry calls were documented, but did not generate any specific investigative directions. From a professional standpoint, the case was classified as a missing person incident without a clear starting point beyond the moment the victim left the convenience store. This meant that any reopening of the file circled back to the same unanswered question: where Lucas went, how and why, when there were no witnesses, no physical evidence, and no technical information to support it. Throughout the entire 2010-2021 period, the case recorded no progress, no new traces appeared, and no factors were sufficient to change the cold case status of the file. In early 2022, Lucas Medina's missing person file had been on the cold case list for more than 13 years. The case was no longer mentioned frequently in the cold case unit's regular meetings, beyond the familiar notes confirming no new information. Everything remained stagnant in that state until a completely unexpected event occurred in the southern area of Albuquerque, an event unrelated to any investigative activity that nonetheless became the most important starting point in the case since 2009. On a morning in February 2022, a city construction crew was expanding a connecting road segment near Rio Bravo Boulevard. The area had previously been semi-vacant land, without solid structures, only some side roads running through sandy soil and scrub brush. As the excavator operated to widen the roadbed and prepare the foundation, the operator noticed the bucket hitting something harder than usual. At first, the crew thought it was a piece of concrete or a metal part left from an old project. However, when the bucket lifted, deformed metal panels emerged from under the dry soil. They were curved and asymmetrical, unlike construction material fragments. The object was buried in the ground, about more than half a meter deep, covered by a layer of soil that had settled over many years. Recognizing that the metal structure resembled part of a vehicle frame, the construction crew immediately halted all operations and reported to management. As the object was manually cleaned with tools, the shape of a pickup truck chassis gradually revealed itself. Since the discovery was in a public area and potentially related to a traffic incident or unreported case, per regulations, the crew notified the Albuquerque Police Department. In a short time, a team of investigators and forensic technicians was dispatched to the scene to secure the area and conduct an initial assessment. As the investigative team approached, enough of the vehicle frame had been exposed for them to determine it was a mid-size pickup truck, most likely buried underground for a long time. The exterior paint was almost completely worn away, the metal surface heavily oxidized, but the overall body structure was still recognizable. The rear license plate no longer existed, possibly removed or fallen off long ago. Realizing that license plate identification would not be effective, investigators requested checking the VIN number, the identification series, stamped directly on the chassis. This is one of the most durable locations on a vehicle, and even covered in dust and dirt, the VIN had a chance of being recovered. Technicians used a soft brush and specialized cleaning solution to access the number sequence. The process took time due to the corroded chassis surface, but eventually part of the VIN sequence could be read. When compared to the DMV database, the results clearly confirmed the buried vehicle matched the Ford F-150 registered under Lucas Medina's name, the truck that disappeared with him on the night in 2009, which investigators had searched for over many weeks without results. With the vehicle identified, the investigative team immediately shifted focus to the cab. The driver's side and passenger side doors were deformed, the floor surface compressed by the pressure of the overlying soil, but the overall frame still allowed entry with specialized tools. As the doors were lifted, the team immediately noticed a human skeleton inside the cab, lying on its side toward the driver's seat. The skeleton's position was not like a normal driving posture. The upper body slumped toward the steering wheel, head tilted to one side, hands not in a steering position. No soft tissue remained, consistent with over a decade in Albuquerque's characteristic hot, dry climate, where soft tissue decomposition occurs quickly, followed by desiccation and ultimately leaving the entire skeleton. The remaining parts showed no major movement after decomposition began, meaning the body had stayed in that position for a long time. The clothing on the skeleton was tattered, but still had some fabric pieces recognizable by color and material. Based on the 2009 description provided by the family, one notable feature was that Lucas was wearing a dark t-shirt and jeans on the night he left home. The remaining fabric pieces in the cab matched this description: dark fabric near the upper body bones and denim material in the area corresponding to the leg bones. Although the full outfit could not be confirmed, these details strengthened the likelihood that the skeleton was Lucas's, even before official forensic examination. During the initial observation, investigators noted a few details on the skeleton that did not fit the typical traffic accident pattern. Normally, an accident at speed enough to cause the vehicle to leave the road and be buried afterward would leave clear injury signs, fractures in characteristic locations like the sternum, compressed ribs, or broken long bones from strong impact. However, such clear signs did not appear at a level corresponding to a vehicle buried deep underground. Some bones had small cracks, but no fracture pattern typical of high-speed accidents. The left arm bone was slightly misaligned, but not enough to conclude it was broken from a strong collision. These points were noted separately for further analysis, as the difference between expected injury patterns and reality could relate to the cause of Lucas's death or his state before the vehicle was buried. Besides the skeleton and fabric pieces, the cab retained some degraded objects that could still provide information. The seats were compressed by the weight of the soil and time, but the metal parts of the seatbelts remained in place. Notably, the driver's seatbelt was not fastened, a point that puzzled investigators, because in some accidents, the driver might reflexively buckle up, but might not. However, this detail was not enough for conclusions in the initial inspection and was noted for later analysis. The surrounding scene was also carefully surveyed. The soil layer covering the vehicle had a nearly uniform structure, reflecting burial over many years, rather than a sudden event with a large mass of soil dumping down. There were no signs of digging by animals or humans. This indicated the vehicle's position had been undisturbed for a long time, and natural terrain gradually covered it over time. Immediately after completing the initial scene assessment, the investigative team made a list of actions per protocol for a long-term missing person case. Suddenly discovering key evidence, recover the vehicle, seal the scene, collect soil samples, search for items in the cab, and transfer the skeleton to the forensic lab for official examination. The discovery of Lucas's vehicle, along with the skeleton inside, was clear enough to pull his missing person case out of cold case status and back into an active investigation. The Lucas Medina file, which had lain dormant in the system for 13 years, was officially reopened on the same day. Authorities confirmed the vehicle's identity and recovered the skeleton from the cab. This marked the most significant shift since Lucas disappeared in 2009, from a case with no traces to one with critical evidence needing deeper analysis. Forensic examination began in the first days after the vehicle was brought in, as every detail, no matter how small, could hold key information about what happened on the night in 2009. The first step in the process was body identification. Since the skeleton had no soft tissue, fingerprint, or physical description, identification was not feasible. Therefore, forensic technicians used dental comparison, particularly tooth structure and dental features recorded in Lucas's medical file from previous years. The forensic department contacted the dentist who had treated Lucas to obtain 2008 dental X-ray records and detailed descriptions of his oral features. When placing Lucas's 2008 X-ray next to the X-ray of the recovered jawbone, technicians quickly confirmed a clear match. Canine tooth shape, old fillings, and jaw structure were completely consistent. This was the factor officially confirming the body's identity. The skeleton found in the vehicle was indeed Lucas Medina's. With identification complete, the forensic team moved to skeletal examination to assess cause of death or factors that could lead to the body's current state. The first noted feature was the absence of fracture traces typical of high-speed traffic accidents. In many cases where a vehicle veers off the road or suffers strong collision, direct impact force on the driver often causes rib fractures, sternum breaks, or long bone fractures. In addition to bone examination, the forensic team collected samples from remaining fabric pieces. Although most clothing had decomposed over time, the small remaining pieces could still provide data on material and color. The dark fabric and denim pieces all matched the 2009 description, reinforcing that the skeleton was Lucas's and indicating he was still wearing the clothes from when he left home. However, the fabric contained no blood traces, engine oil, or organic substances remaining enough for analysis. Prolonged decomposition in hot, dry conditions made finding microscopic traces nearly impossible. In the vehicle cab, technicians found several important pieces of evidence. The first item was Lucas's cell phone, a common flip phone model from that time, lying on the floor near the driver's seat foot area. The device was heavily damaged, with a cracked screen and corroded casing, but the SIM tray was still intact. Technicians carefully removed the SIM, placed it in an anti-static box, and sealed it for later data analysis. In many old cases, SIM cards could store minimal information like contacts or system data, but content recovery depended on the extent of damage and analysis technology. The second item was a small mini-DV camera, wedged between the seat crevice and the deformed cab frame. Although the outer casing was scratched and slightly deformed, the internal tape cartridge remained intact. Technicians marked this as high-value evidence because in some cases, handheld camcorders could contain footage recorded before the incident. However, no one made hasty judgments, as long-aged magnetic tape might be damaged or unplayable. In addition to the phone and camera, the cab contained a piece of synthetic fiber cord about more than 20 centimeters long, light gray in color, lying on the floor next to the passenger seat. It was unclear whether this cord belonged to the vehicle's equipment or was a foreign object brought in after the incident. The cord piece was almost completely covered in dust and soil, with a rough surface and frayed fibers due to time. Technicians collected the cord piece and placed it in a separate sealed bag because it could be a crucial clue if it was not part of the vehicle's original structure. Furthermore, technicians also collected soil samples from inside the cab and crevices for composition analysis. The mineral composition of the soil could help determine when the vehicle was placed in that location or if it was moved before burial. However, at the initial examination stage, only sample collection was performed without analysis. After collecting evidence, the forensic team scanned the cab for any remaining traces. They checked under the seats, behind the seats, the dashboard, and door crevices. The long burial period caused most evidence to be destroyed or no longer analyzable. No clear traces of liquids like engine oil, blood, or other substances were found, consistent with prolonged natural decomposition. However, a few small plastic pieces and detached metal parts were collected in case they were related to equipment once in the vehicle. At the end of the initial examination phase, all evidence and forensic conclusions were transferred back to the investigative unit for further review. The discovery of the vehicle and body, along with details inconsistent with typical accident patterns, created a clear turning point. Lucas Medina's missing person case was no longer a disappearance without cause, but became a case with many unexplained factors, requiring more thorough examination in subsequent steps. After the forensic technicians completed the skeletal examination and evidence collection from the buried vehicle's cab, one of the most important tasks implemented immediately afterward was data recovery from Lucas Medina's old cell phone and the mini DV tape found in the seat crevice. Although the devices had endured more than 13 years buried in harsh environmental conditions, modern 2022 analysis processes allowed the application of recovery techniques that were completely impossible in the 2009 phase. Lucas's phone was a common flip model from that era, not a modern smartphone, but still capable of storing message content, contacts, and some basic data. When the device was brought into the digital forensics lab, technicians first disassembled each component, inspecting the motherboard and memory chip to assess data retrieval feasibility. Despite heavy damage from oxidation and soil pressure, part of the memory chip remained intact, enough to proceed with direct extraction via low-level data reading protocols. Using specialized chip reading equipment, technicians began extracting remaining data blocks. This process took many days, as fragmented or damaged data regions needed partial recovery. When software reassembled the scattered data segments, a large number of messages, including those deleted before 2009, began to appear. This was something the initial investigation phase was completely unable to achieve. As the message data was sorted by time, technicians noticed that most content related to one person only, Emery Calderon. The frequency of contact between Lucas and Emery in the weeks before Lucas disappeared was much higher than what was reflected in Emery's 2009 statements. They exchanged messages frequently, with many conversations occurring in the evening and late at night, times when Emery previously said they did not communicate much. The final messages before Lucas vanished showed he was in a state of anxiety, overthinking, and mentioned feeling like someone was following or watching from afar. Some messages he sent received no immediate response, while some deleted messages contained content showing Lucas confused, disoriented, and referring to pressure from someone else. Forensic technicians noted that Lucas used unclear language, but the emotions expressed in the message chain indicated he felt unsafe in the days before disappearing. Most notably, there was a chain of deleted messages sent to Emery about 1 day before Lucas left home. In them, Lucas mentioned feeling unable to escape the situation he was experiencing. Although the wording did not clearly describe the nature of the situation, Technicians noted the level of stress expressed in Lucas's sentences. This part was marked as critical for investigators to analyze later, as it could relate to Lucas's behavior and mood right before the incident. When the message data was compiled, the preliminary digital forensics report showed Lucas had contacted Emery much more frequently than Emery's statements indicated. There were many deleted messages expressing unease and a feeling of being followed. And especially the tone in the final messages showed Lucas was not just worried, but felt he was in a dangerous situation he could not clearly describe. Meanwhile, the mini-DV tape recovery process ran in parallel. Lucas's magnetic tape might have been damaged, but the intact cartridge was an encouraging sign. Technicians placed the tape in a specialized cleaning device to remove dust, soil, and adhered debris from the surface. Afterward, the tape was inserted into a playback machine dedicated to old mini-DV tapes. Initially, the image was heavily noisy, but after adjusting the magnetic head and using image stabilization software, frames gradually appeared. The video showed Lucas recording himself, most likely inside the vehicle cab, in the evening or at night, because the lighting in the footage was very low. Lucas's facial expression was tense, his eyes continuously glancing toward the window or the passenger seat, as if trying to observe something outside. The voice in the video was quiet and trembling, unlike his normal voice, according to friends' previous accounts. In the video, Lucas said he didn't know how this would end, and that something was wrong in recent days. He mentioned feeling followed or pressured, but did not name anyone. Some of his statements were very fragmented, as if he was trying to express himself but distracted by external sounds or strange lights entering the cab. The final frame of the video was heavily noisy, but Lucas could still be seen suddenly turning his head toward the window, his voice becoming more tense. The video ended without explanation or clear images of what happened immediately after. When technicians reanalyzed every second of the video, they noted that Lucas showed no signs of intoxication or loss of control. His expression was completely alert but deeply anxious. There were no indications that the video was staged or recorded in a space other than Lucas's vehicle. When both the phone data and mini-DV video were compiled, an initial assessment was made. Lucas did not fall into a normal situation before disappearing. The messages showed he was facing psychological pressure or threat from an unidentified factor. The video showed he felt followed and fearful, a state far beyond normal worry. Although this data did not provide direct evidence of the cause of death, it raised suspicions about a dangerous situation involving others or external factors, which were completely absent from the 2009 file. The final Digital Forensics Department report concluded that the recovered data opened many new questions about the context leading to Lucas's disappearance. This information was transferred back to the investigative unit with clear notes that the case needed re-examination in greater depth, as it reflected Lucas's particularly uneasy state right before the time he was determined to have gone missing. After the phone data and mini-DV tape video showed Lucas Medina in the final days before disappearing falling into an unusually anxious state, the investigative unit considered the possibility of applying modern mobile signal analysis technology to reconstruct the path of Lucas's vehicle on the night in 2009. In the initial investigation phase, carrier data only provided information that Lucas's phone connected to a broad cell tower covering many different areas. However, by 2022, more advanced analysis techniques, including triangulation and path reconstruction via tower response signals, allowed re-examination of old data with much higher accuracy. The first step was to obtain the complete 2009 raw signal records from the carrier. Although the data was old and partially no longer intact, basic data packets about connection times and signal strength weakness between the phone and cell towers were still stored. In 2009, these numbers could not provide detailed positioning, but by 2022, they could be reanalyzed through computational models based on signal strength, latency, and phase offset at each time point. The digital analysis team began building a simulation model of the path by matching Lucas's phone signals with the 2009 cell tower distribution map. Each connection was represented as a vicinity circle, the range where the phone could likely be at the connection time. Then, using triangulation algorithms, they identified intersection areas between vicinity circles at each time marker, allowing narrowing of the actual travel range. The first simulation result shows that Lucas's phone moved south immediately after he left the convenience store. The data also indicates that his mobile signal did not turn off right away, but continued to operate for a short additional period before completely disappearing. This aligns with him leaving the residential area, driving on a stretch of road without camera systems in those years, and then reaching an open land area where the signal gradually weakened. When the analysis team matched the probable route with the detailed 2009 map system, a key conclusion emerged. The simulated journey led straight to the southern area, which was where the construction crew discovered the vehicle buried underground in 2022. This match created a clear advancement in reconstructing the events of the night Lucas disappeared. Although the data was insufficient to determine the vehicle's speed or reason for stopping, the location matching the discovery site of the vehicle is the strongest indicator since the case was reopened. Next, the analysis team cross-referenced data from Lucas's phone with data from related individuals, including Emery Calderon. Although Emery had been interviewed in the initial phase with no clear signs of direct involvement in Lucas's disappearance, the new results from recovered message analysis showed that the level of communication between the two was many times greater than the initial statements. Therefore, re-examining Emery's phone signals from 2009 became a necessary step. Thanks to legal requests for the investigation, the carrier provided Emery's connection data from around the time Lucas went missing. This data was similar to Lucas's not detailed, no GPS, but could still be analyzed using 2022 triangulation techniques. When the technical team cross-referenced it, they discovered that during a time frame on the night Lucas disappeared, Emery's phone connected to a cell tower in the same broad coverage area as the southern Albuquerque region. This is not evidence that Emery was at the exact location where the vehicle was buried, but it shows she was in the geographic vicinity at a critical time. The signal overlap between Lucas's phone and Emery's phone only lasted a short time, a few minutes, but the results were enough to draw the attention of the investigative unit. The coverage area of this cell tower included the connecting road leading to the area where the vehicle was discovered. This means that Emery, at some point that night, had appeared in an area not too far from where Lucas passed through. The most important point is the triangulation data, when combined with Lucas's simulated journey data, showing that both phones were in the same coverage area during the overlapping time period. There is no basis to conclude they were at the same exact location, but this signal overlap had never been considered before because 2009 analysis technology did not allow for such detailed detection. When the travel route map was fully reconstructed, a journey model was established. Lucas left the convenience store, headed south, approached the area where the vehicle was later found. The phone signal gradually decreased in that direction, indicating he had left the residential area and entered open land. The phone lost connection completely afterward, consistent with the location where the buried vehicle was discovered. The digital analysis team prepared a report for the investigative unit. Lucas's device journey led to the area where the vehicle was found. Emery's triangulation data showed she had appeared in a similar coverage area at a nearby time, and these data, combined with recovered messages and mini-DV video, suggest that the night in 2009 did not unfold under normal conditions. All this new data was handed over to the Cold Case Unit investigation team, with a note that it for the first time created a verifiable timeline and a common geographic area between the victim and the victim's closest acquaintance. This is not a conclusion, but merely a significant investigative lead, a lead that the file had lacked for more than 13 years prior. At the end of the cell tower analysis phase, the case was no longer a simple missing person incident. The new data showed that Lucas had gone to the place where the vehicle was buried, and that someone may have been in the nearby range at that time. This was the first time since 2009 that the journey of that fateful night could be reconstructed logically and with real data, opening up an entirely new approach for the investigative unit. Reconstructing the journey based on 2022 cell tower data opened a major turning point. For the first time in over 13 years, the investigative unit had technical grounds to cross-check Emery Calderon's 2009 statements with objective data. The appearance of Emery's phone signal in the same coverage area as Lucas on the night of the disappearance, even without pinpointing the exact location, was considered a strong enough factor to summon her again. No longer a mere witness as in the initial phase, Emery was now interrogated with a higher level of detail, in the context of all the recovered data revealing many things she had never mentioned. The interrogation began by asking Emery to provide her statement again about the day Lucas disappeared. She maintained her old assertion that they did not meet that night and that she did not clearly remember the last time they communicated. The investigators let her fully explain, noting every sentence, before moving to the cross-checking step, a familiar approach in interrogations to allow the subject to establish the scope of their statement before being presented with contradicting information. When cross-referencing the 2009 statement transcript with the current one, the investigation team pointed out small discrepancies they had once considered unimportant in the initial phase. The time Emery said she last texted Lucas, details about communication frequency, and her claim of not knowing if Lucas had plans to meet anyone. These discrepancies were placed on the table as part of the review process, but this was just a prelude. The significant difference did not stem from faulty memory, but from digital data Emery could not deny. The investigators presented that the forensics department had recovered many messages deleted from Lucas's phone. They did not read the detailed content to Emery right away. Instead, they asked her a simple question: "Did you ever delete messages between you and Lucas?" Emery hesitated. In her 2009 statement, she had asserted she did not delete any. This time, she vaguely replied that she might have deleted a few old messages, but didn't remember clearly. The investigators asked her to describe the content of the deleted messages, and Emery responded that they were probably normal messages, nothing important. At this point, the investigators revealed the information. There were dozens of messages deleted right in the 1 to 2 week period before Lucas disappeared. This was not the behavior of habitually deleting old messages, but intentional action focused around a sensitive time. Upon hearing the number of deleted messages, Emery appeared more tense but maintained her stance that she did not remember the content. Next, the investigators cross-referenced the last recovered messages, a chain showing Lucas's sudden anxiety, including descriptions that he couldn't escape this situation, felt like he was being followed, and was under pressure from someone. When asked if Emery knew anything that made Lucas panic like that, she replied that he was sometimes sensitive and overthought things, a response mismatched with the tense tone in the recovered messages. The investigators moved to the mini-DV tape content. They described, without playing the video for her to see right away, that Lucas had recorded inside the car that evening, in a state of anxiety and feeling someone was following him. When asked if Lucas had ever told her anything about someone pressuring him, Emery continued to evade, saying she didn't remember Lucas ever telling a similar story. Emery's evasion became clearer when the investigators presented the 2022 recovered cell tower data. They asked Emery where she was on the night Lucas disappeared. Emery answered the same as in 2009, at home. The investigators immediately asked, "If you were at home, why did your phone signal connect to the tower in the same area where Lucas's vehicle was found?" Emery was silent for a long time before replying that her phone might have automatically connected while passing through the area at a different time of day. However, the investigators pointed out that the analyzed connection time fell exactly during the period when Lucas left the convenience store. The overlap time, though short, was enough to rule out the possibility that Emery was completely not near that area. When directly asked if she met Lucas that night, Emery refused to admit it, but her body language, tensing up, changing breathing rhythm, and her continuously adjusting answers to fit other possibilities, showed escalating stress levels. The investigators did not accuse her right away, but noted that her statement was no longer consistent. The biggest contradiction emerged when the investigators asked, why were the most important messages from that time period, those showing Lucas was scared, anxious, and wanted to avoid someone, only deleted on your side? not Lucas's. According to the recovery data, many messages from Lucas remained in the deleted memory of his phone, but the response messages from Emery, also deleted, were on her side with dense frequency. This showed that Emery's message deletion behavior was not automatic or accidental, but selective based on the conversation flow. When the investigators provided this detail, Emery froze. This was the first time in the interrogation she did not respond immediately. Finally, she only said, "I don't remember deleting that many." The investigators noted the response, but did not accept the vagueness. They clearly established that Emery had stated in 2009 she did not delete messages, but 2022 confirmed she deleted many. Stated she did not communicate with Lucas near the disappearance time, but data showed continuous contact. Stated she was not near the southern city area, but her phone signal overlapped with Lucas's phone region. Stated she did not know what Lucas was anxious about, but messages showed she participated in tense exchanges. These points were categorized as material inconsistencies under investigation regulations, not simply memory errors. These inconsistencies demonstrated intentional concealment of information. From a witness once considered unrelated, Emery now became the person with the most anomalies in the entire file. At the end of the interrogation, the investigators clearly noted in the report, Emery Calderon's inconsistencies are significant enough to consider her as a potential suspect. The new data requires a complete reevaluation of the entire relationship between Emery and Lucas, especially in the final hours before the victim disappeared. The case was no longer based on gut feelings, speculation, or vague statements, but on phone data, video data, and digital evidence deletion behavior. This was the first time in 13 years that the file began shifting from an undirected state to a specific investigative direction, with Emery at the center of the suspicion circle. The next morning, the Cold Case Unit investigation team, along with the digital forensics group, held multiple expert meetings to compile all the new evidence and assess the reliability of each data source. The first step in this synthesis was to re-examine the chain of recovered messages from Lucas's phone. The deleted messages, which could not be accessed in 2009, now show that Lucas was continuously texting Emery before disappearing. The importance lies in the content. Lucas described feeling followed, under pressure, and unable to escape from something he did not specify. The tone in the messages was urgent and markedly tense, inconsistent with Emery's statement that Lucas was just sensitive and overthought things. The recovered messages also reveal that Emery deleted a series of messages right after Lucas disappeared, including sensitive exchanges in the final moments. This was not random deletion of old messages, but selective behavior focused on the critical time period. Investigators assessed that Emery's failure to report this, while denying frequent communication with Lucas, constituted intentional concealment of information. After analyzing the messages, the investigation team proceeded to examine the recovered mini-DV video. The video is the only visual evidence capturing Lucas's state in the time immediately before he vanished. The footage shows Lucas recording himself in dim light, with a low, trembling, and unstable voice. His expressions clearly displayed fear, not the ordinary anxiety his family had described. In the video, Lucas repeatedly looked out of the car, interrupted his sentences, and said that something was wrong, someone was following him, and he didn't know how this would end. Notably, throughout the entire video, Lucas did not mention any internal personal factors, such as depression or mental health issues. On the contrary, his words implied an external agent. Combined with the message chain, investigators determined that Lucas was reacting to a real situation, rather than a subjective psychological state. Next, the 2022 Cell Tower Technology Analysis Team presented the triangulation results. This piece added objectivity to the file. According to the signal simulation, Lucas's phone moved south after leaving the convenience store and approached the location where the vehicle was buried, consistent with the 2022 discovery site. Particularly, the data also indicated that Emery's phone connected to the same cell tower at a nearly corresponding time, despite her claim of being home all evening. Although triangulation could not pinpoint Emery's exact location, her signal overlap area with Lucas was in the same region, the area where the vehicle was found. This is the key detail. Emery's statements about not being near there, not meeting Lucas, not remembering communicating that night, were all refuted by objective digital data. After analyzing the travel route, the investigation team focused on the physical evidence found in the vehicle cabin. The skeleton showed no characteristics of high-impact accident injuries, but some positions were offset from a normal driving posture, suggesting the possibility that Lucas was not actively controlling the vehicle when the incident occurred. The unbuckled seatbelt in the driver's seat was also a major question, as the anxious signals in the video were inconsistent with Lucas sitting relaxed in the car without buckling up. The damaged phone but intact SIM allowed message data recovery. The mini DV camera contained critical video, and notably, the piece of synthetic fiber buried under the cabin floor, not an original vehicle component, was recorded as evidence potentially related to the body being left in the cabin. Although not deeply analyzed in this phase, this evidence contributed to reinforcing the assessment that the vehicle cabin did not passively contain Lucas's body, but likely involved intervention or external impact. When all the evidence was placed side by side, a consistent picture began to form. Lucas had left home in an uneasy state, sending messages to Emery about feeling followed. The video showed Lucas still anxious in the car, not directly threatened by someone, but feeling pulled into a situation he could not control. Cell tower data indicated that Emery was near the area Lucas passed through, contrary to her initial and supplemental statements. The deleted messages proved Emery had communicated with Lucas in the critical hours and actively concealed this for 13 years. Physical evidence and forensic examination showed Lucas died in a condition not consistent with a high-impact traffic accident. This, combined with the vehicle being buried underground for years, created a clear hypothesis: Lucas did not cause the situation leading to his death himself. At the very least, he was left in a dangerous position without assistance, despite Emery claiming she knew nothing. In the final synthesis meeting, the lead investigator presented the conclusions. 1. Recovered messages show Lucas was in danger after meeting or communicating with Emery. 2. The mini DV video displays abnormal fear, consistent with the message content. 3. Cell tower analysis proves Emery was near the buried vehicle area, contrary to her 2009 and 2022 statements. 4. Evidence in the vehicle and forensic examination show Lucas did not die in a normal accident, but in a state of being abandoned. Based on these points, the operational conclusion was reached: Emery Calderon played a role in creating the situation leading to Lucas Medina's death and intentionally concealed information for over 13 years. The behavior of deleting messages, providing false statements, and unexplained presence near the crime scene were considered elements constituting participation in the chain of events leading to Lucas's death. The investigation conclusion report was signed by the cold case unit lead and forwarded to the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office. The Albuquerque Police Department officially recommended prosecuting Emery Calderon on charges related to creating the situation leading to death and concealing critical information during the investigation. After 13 years without resolution, the Lucas Medina disappearance case finally reached the investigation conclusion stage, marking a significant milestone before moving to the next phase in the legal system. The 2022 trial related to Lucas Medina's death attracted significant attention when the prosecutor began presenting the entire investigation chain, spanning over 13 years, starting from the seemingly hopeless 2009 disappearance to the recovery of forensic evidence, digital data, and cell tower analysis thanks to modern technology. Before the jury, the prosecution opened by describing the case context: an 18-year-old leaving home on an ordinary evening in Albuquerque, vanishing without a trace, leaving his family in prolonged distress. Then, the prosecution detailed how the initial investigation failed due to technological limitations, absence of physical evidence, lack of camera and phone data information at the time. However, the trial's focus was not on the early phase, but on the results unlocked by 2022 forensic technology, identifying the VIN number of the buried vehicle, identifying the body via dental records, bone examination showing no injuries consistent with high-speed accidents, recovering deleted messages from Lucas's phone, restoring the mini-DV video, and triangulation analysis to reconstruct the vehicle's journey. All these factors, according to the prosecution, formed a consistent chain of evidence, leading to the conclusion that Emery Calderon played a critical role in creating the dangerous situation leading to Lucas's death, and then concealed the truth for over a decade. In the most detailed presentation, the prosecution presented the recovered message transcript extracted directly from Lucas's phone memory chip, showing he continuously sent messages to Emery in the final days before disappearing, expressing high levels of fear, feeling followed, and under pressure from someone he dared not name. These messages were displayed in court, along with the digital expert's explanation of how the data was intentionally deleted from Emery's device and how modern forensic systems could recover them despite heavy phone hardware damage. The prosecution emphasized that Emery's 2009 statement that she barely communicated with Lucas and knew nothing about his condition directly contradicted the recovered message data. Next, the prosecution played the mini-DV video found in the vehicle cabin in which Lucas recorded himself on the night of disappearance. The anxious Lucas, low and trembling voice, constantly looking outside, talking about feeling unable to escape, and someone following him, was described by the prosecution as strong evidence that he was in a dangerous situation rather than simply unstable psychologically. The video forensic expert also testified about the video's authenticity, confirming the footage was unedited and the lighting matched the Ford F-150 cabin. When moving to the core cell tower analysis section, the prosecution called the telecommunications expert to the stand to explain how 2009 data, nearly useless at the time, was processed using modern triangulation models to determine Lucas's phone actual travel path. Simulated evidence on the map showed Lucas's phone moved south in the exact direction leading to the underground vehicle discovery site, fully consistent with the 2022 scene. But the most attention-grabbing point was Emery Calderon's cell tower data. Her phone signal was confirmed to appear in the same coverage area at the same time Lucas was moving to the scene area. This signal overlap was called by the prosecution the first physical evidence completely refuting Emery's statement that she was home all evening. The prosecution continued connecting the pieces, Emery deleting messages, lying about communication frequency, not reporting being near the scene area, and the video showing Lucas fearful due to a situation involving someone. This chain was presented by the prosecution as systematic dishonesty, not just hazy memory, but an effort to conceal information from the start. In addition to technical data, the prosecution presented physical evidence, the synthetic fiber piece, not part of the vehicle structure, unbuckled driver's seatbelt, and abnormally offset left arm bone, all described as signs that Lucas was not actively controlling the vehicle when he died. The prosecution emphasized no evidence proved Lucas died in an ordinary accident. Instead, evidence showed he was left in a dangerous situation, a behavior that Emery, as the last person in dense contact with Lucas, completely failed to report. In the defense portion, Emery's lawyer focused arguments on psychological factors and her awareness level in 2009. According to the defense, Emery was only 17 at the time, under pressure from various personal issues, not fully aware of the consequences of deleting messages and not understanding the full severity of Lucas's disappearance. The lawyer also argued that cell tower data only determined coverage areas, not exact presence, and that recovered messages might reflect Lucas's unstable psychological state rather than real threats. The defense spent considerable time questioning the forensic expert about error margins in triangulation data analysis, raising the possibility that Emery was near the area at a different time of day, unrelated to Lucas's journey. They also questioned whether the mini-DV video, necessarily reflected danger from another individual or just unstable psychological manifestation. Nevertheless, the prosecution countered that intentional message deletion, statement inconsistencies, and signal overlap in the exact sensitive time frame could not be explained merely by adolescent psychological state. When the argument phase ended, the jury entered the deliberation stage. They considered Emery's criminal responsibility based on three criteria: objective data from forensics and telecommunications, intentional information concealment behavior, and Emery's role in creating or failing to prevent the dangerous situation leading to Lucas's death. Criminal responsibility here lay not only in direct actions causing death, but also in contributing to the dangerous context and concealing critical information that prolonged the case for over 13 years. The jury analyzed that the alignment between messages, video, and cell tower journey was consistent. Emery's statement changes over the years were significant, and message deletion focused only on the key moment reinforced the assessment that Emery had subjective intent in concealment. Although the trial continued and had not yet entered the sentencing phase, the prosecution's presentation had laid out an overall picture hard to ignore: that Lucas Medina experienced his final hours in abnormal fear. That Emery Calderon was the only person in dense communication with him during that time. That cell tower data placed her in the area where the vehicle was buried, and that concealment behaviors lasting over 13 years could not be explained by accident or mistake. This was the context the jury had to weigh to decide Emery's criminal responsibility level based on the seamless evidence chain presented by the prosecution in court. The verdict was announced in the afternoon of the third day of the trial, after the jury discussed additional legal factors related to criminal responsibility in the 13-year context. As Emery Calderon stood before the court to hear the verdict, the courtroom atmosphere was almost completely silent. The presiding judge began by reading each charge in turn, based on the entire chain of forensic evidence, phone data, cell tower analysis, and intentional inconsistencies in Emery's statements. The jury accordingly found Emery guilty of involuntary manslaughter, with the reasoning that she directly created or maintained a dangerous situation leading to Lucas Medina's death and took no action to prevent the consequences, despite having the ability and conditions to do so. The second charge, tampering with evidence, was based on Emery intentionally deleting numerous related messages, providing false statements in various investigation phases, and being near the buried vehicle area, but concealing information for over a decade. After announcing the charges, the court moved to sentencing, assessing the severity of the behavior, personal factors, and psychological context in 2009. The presiding judge affirmed that although Emery was young at the time and might not have foreseen all consequences, the intentional concealment actions lasting 13 years proved she understood that revealing the truth would be disadvantageous to her and caused the victim's family to live without resolution for too long. For involuntary manslaughter, Emery was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, with a minimum of 7 years to be served before considering parole under New Mexico regulations. For tampering with evidence, she received an additional 5 years, with 3 years suspended, totaling 15 years, but the minimum actual imprisonment time was 12 years before considering any reduction. In addition to prison, the court imposed 5 years of probation after release, requiring Emery to comply with periodic checks, mandatory psychological treatment, and no contact with any Lucas Medina family members in any form. The presiding judge also ordered Emery to participate in a community service program for cases involving support for teenagers and community safety, to partially compensate for the impact her actions caused. Immediately after the sentence was announced, the Albuquerque Police Department held a press conference announcing new improvements in missing persons investigation procedures, driven by the shortcomings exposed in the Lucas Medina case. APD announced expanding phone data storage to the extent permitted by law, improving coordination processes with modern cell tower technology, and establishing a dedicated unit for data recovery in missing persons or vehicle disappearance cases without traces. APD leadership emphasized that the Lucas case was clear proof that a seemingly unsolvable case could still be cracked when law enforcement had sufficient technical tools and persistently pursued files even after many years. The Medina family, after hearing the sentence, did not show joy but only expressed painful relief after prolonged suffering. They said the sentence could not bring Lucas back, but the truth finally being revealed was necessary so he would not be forgotten as an anonymous missing person case. When the trial officially concluded, the Lucas Medina file was changed from cold case, active investigation to closed conviction achieved, marking the first time in 13 years the incident had a clear legal conclusion. With the sentence for Emery and the improvements APD implemented afterward, the Lucas Medina case became one of the exemplary cases for solving long-term cases thanks to technological progress, investigative persistence, and the importance of preserving data in every missing person incident. The story of the Lucas Medina case is not only the journey of solving a 13-year cold case, but also reflects real challenges in modern American life, where technology develops rapidly, but people are sometimes left in isolation, misunderstanding, or lack of safe connections. One of the most important details in the story is that Lucas expressed fear through messages and the mini DV video. He said he felt followed and could not escape that situation. Today, many teenagers and young people in the United States also face mental pressure, but they do not know how to seek support in time. The lesson here is any sign of unease, no matter how vague, deserves serious attention from family, friends, and the community. The case also highlights the importance of technology when used correctly. In 2009, cell tower data, messages, and video could not be fully exploited, but in 2022, technology helped reconstruct the entire disappearance journey. This reminds us that in modern society, information storage and transparency in communication can become lifelines when incidents occur. Additionally, Emery's behavior of deleting messages and providing false statements is a profound warning. Concealing the truth, whether out of fear or avoiding responsibility, can lead to serious legal consequences. American culture values honesty, personal responsibility, and community values. Therefore, the important lesson drawn from the Lucas Medina case is speak up when someone is in danger, protect the truth even when it is hard to face, and seek help from the community. Because silence is sometimes what causes the longest-lasting tragedies. Thank you for joining the story of the Lucas Medina case. If you want to continue following journeys of solving cold cases like this, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any episodes. See you in the next video, where we will continue exploring stories hidden under the layers of time and truths that are finally brought to light.